as I said before, my name is Vicki Perry. I'm the Executive Director of Cyrea, and what we're trying to do is help our members meet our vendors in a better way. Keep in mind that Cyrea is the only RIA or real estate association or meetup that I know of in our entire state that does a background check and application process for all of our vendors. We try to make sure that you have a safe place to do business and that you can trust the people that we bring to you. And with that being said, I want to introduce you to someone who is, I've done, I don't want to say a lot of business because that makes it sound like I need an attorney a lot, but someone that I truly trust. And not only is Jeff a member of Cyrea, he is the attorney for the board of directors for Indiana State RIA, and he's my personal attorney. And I started hiring Jeff after I met him at Cyrea, and so that was one of the success stories. So with that being said, let me introduce you to attorney Jeff Jinks, and Jeff, take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vicki. Thank you very much, Vicki. I really appreciate the introduction and the kind words. Am I on video? Am I on audio or?
Yes, you're good. Everything is good.
Okay. So number one, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for just the opportunity as a vendor to speak to all of our members today and at other times, of course. We love coming to Cyrea. We've been a sponsor for probably 5 out of 6 years that you've been with Cyrea, Vicki, and I really enjoyed meeting you at the beginning, as well as all the people that you've brought in. The membership is fantastic, and I really am encouraged by the people and the quality of the investors that come to our meetings and the type of questions that we get. So I do appreciate it, and we love working with everybody in Cyrea, and that's why we wanted to give this video today and have a little bit of a time to get to know each other better. We're going to talk specifically about limited liability companies and asset protection, and one of the products that we've created because of the demand that we've seen from all the members at Cyrea and our regular clients, and you know, just go through that a little bit. To help get started, though, I do want to introduce my partner. We set up a separate company, DIY Real Estate Education, LLC, and my partner is Jimmy Shatara. Jimmy is a real estate investor. He's a realtor. He is an extraordinary gentleman. He also does a lot of technology work, and he developed the learning and education platform that we've got for DIY. And I want to introduce him just a little bit. He did our website as well, and we've gotten a lot of business because of our website. So I really want to tout him. If you need some website business, some website work done, he's fantastic and really understands how the technology works. So I'm going to give this over to Jimmy for just a minute. I want him to talk about the platform a little bit and how you can access what we're talking about today when you're on your own time afterwards. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to share my screen. I'm also going to put the URL to the website in the chat for everyone to see as well. So right now, I'm going to share my screen so everyone can see everything. So this is what you're going to see once you put in mydiyrealestate.com/partner/Cyrea. So we will click off this, and basically this is going to be the main website you're going to see. And we have a banner just for Cyrea members. We have a special that we'll talk about here at the end, but you'll be able to click to the sales page to get more information about our flagship product we're going to talk about today, the LLC Blueprint. So we will click here, or if you scroll down, you see all of our other courses, and you could click here as well. So this is what you're going to see when you land on the website, and these will also take you to the checkout page. But this has all the information about what Jeff's going to be talking about today, introducing the content. But this is where you would access the actual platform. And these also give you some quick access to the information about the course. So you can click around, also see preview videos of what you'll be able to see in the actual course, the information. So if you would join, this is how you get to the checkout page. So now I'm going to bring it back to Jeff so he can explain more about the programs itself.
Excellent. Thank you, Jimmy. And again, we'll come back to that at the end to go through it a little bit more. The main thing that we want to talk about is the benefits to you as the CYREA members of what this course is about and what the education is that's being provided. We do, unlike other law firms, we don't really talk about the type of work we do necessarily in like the product, but we more focus on who we represent, which is real estate investors. And within that, there's a lot of broad need of legal representation, and it covers everything from transactions to litigation. And part of that is asset protection. That's really in the core of all the things that are happening when we're representing somebody. So when you do a transaction, you're trying to make sure that you enter into it correctly, and that there's no hidden minefields, and that you do your due diligence, and that everything is clear to close at the title company when you actually go to closing, and that everything is really what you expect it to be. And if you don't do it that way, you're creating opportunities to be sued or things to go bad later. And we try to prevent problems at that level. We also have direct litigation where things have gone wrong and we get brought into a case or a matter for a client after the fact. And so we see it from that angle as well. And I want to share with you some reality, some statistics from the Indiana.gov website about what the litigation is in the state of Indiana, how many cases, and that kind of a thing. Because in this course and in general, I don't try to overhype it and oversell fear or anything like that. It's just what we sell is prudent, good business practices that anybody that is in the real estate business or any kind of business needs to have basic asset protection. And it's like your grandma said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that's 100% true in the real estate investing world. And you can really prevent a lot of problems. We just got contacted yesterday by a client, and his corporate entities were so improperly done and formulated, and the contracts he was using did nothing but expose him to massive liability. And he wanted us to file a suit on a claim, and we just said that we cannot do this because your situation is so out of whack. And it's not, as you'll see in the course, it is complicated on the one hand, but it's also very methodical and very easy to do it the right way if you just do things carefully. So I'm going to pull a couple stats for you, and I'm reading from my notes because I've got it, here in front of me. This is a pictograph from the state of Indiana about how many cases are filed in 2019. This is new cases filed. And I'm going to start with an easy one, the small claims courts. There were 174,000 cases filed in small claims court. Most of those are going to be landlord-tenant and collection type of matters. And what you should take away from that is that there's all this litigation brewing where if you're a landlord, evicting a tenant or suing on your lease, that's always an exposure to possibly being countersued and having a claim come back against you as a landlord for doing something wrong. So 174,000 cases in small claims court. And what is perhaps different and more important this year than ever is the sort of the tenants' rights movements that are going on around the country. And we're seeing it here in Indiana. And all of you have felt the effects of the eviction moratoriums on the state level and the federal level. And part of that is a movement by various special interest groups to provide free legal representation on behalf of tenants. And the basis of that is going to be to try to slow down the eviction process, and try to raise claims against quote unquote bad landlords who are not managing their properties correctly or who are taking advantage of tenants in some way. But all they have to do is file a counterclaim, which only costs a few dollars in small claims court. And they, first of all, delay the eviction process, but also they open you up as an investor and a housing provider to a lot of potential liability. Even if it's not well-founded, there is a, there's a value to settle a case, even if it's not a great case, right? So,
Hey, Jeff.
A lot of issues.
Jeff, we got a couple questions about how many cases in the whole state, but how many were in Indy?
I will try to, I'll pull that and get it for you, but this breakdown that I've got in front of me doesn't have that. I'll have Tim pulled these up a minute ago, and I'll have him take a look at that and see maybe if I can break down a few things by Marion County and other places.
Okay. And then we also have a question from Ali. Is multi-member LLC safer than a single member LLC from asset protection point of view?
It's a good question. And the answer is, my lawyer answer is, it depends. And I do want to encourage people to put their questions in when we were discussing the presentation today. Vicki said that some presenters like to take the questions at the end. I'm happy to take them throughout because it gets, the flow from the audience of what you're most interested in and what you're most concerned about. So I want to jump into the multi-member versus the single member and say that it really depends. The most important issue is whether the company is set up correctly from the beginning and whether it's being operated correctly throughout the course. And that gets into the idea of piercing the corporate veil. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the course very extensively. The main issue with having a multi-member LLC is that it becomes much more complicated in terms of the distributions, the buyouts, the tax treatment, etc. So you might find us recommending a structure where you would hold your interest in that multi-member in a single member LLC by itself. So if there's an entity that's owning a project and there's 3 or 4 partners in it, that would be one situation, and each partner ought to hold their interest in in their own individual LLC. That ought to be single member going back up. So that's a quick answer for that. The operating agreements on multi-member LLCs become much more complicated and lengthy than a single member because of the relationship between the partners and how you manage the business, how you make distributions, who makes decisions, who's got authority. And that can be highly negotiated, meaning lots of time back and forth among lawyers. Sometimes when it's just maybe a husband and a wife, it's a little bit different scenario. And still, I'd recommend us having individual entities inside there, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the course as well. Did you have one more question on there, Jimmy? I see 3 questions on the chat, or 3. I saw three people on the chat, maybe.
No, that was it.
Okay.
Oh, I just saw another one just come in right now. We have 2 properties we rent. Each is in its own LLC. Should the LLC own the properties?
Can you repeat that? Because I think they answered their own question.
Yeah, it says we have 2 little properties we rent. Each, it's in its own LLC. Should the LLCs own the properties?
Yes, so it sounds to me like it's a little bit unclear to me, because what you're saying is to bottom line answer and maybe clear the air for everybody else. We always recommend that every property is put into its own LLC, individual, the single member, and we sometimes lawyers call that a bankruptcy remote entity or a special purpose entity. And all that means is that every property has its own LLC. And that ownership of that property should be deeded into the name of the LLC so that as of record, the owner is the LLC. And then if you've got two properties like this person with the question, they've got two, yes, you ought to have two. And I'm going to talk about that for a second here because it's very important. We even recommend going back one step when you're acquiring the property to form a new entity for the purpose of the acquisition and put that into the purchase agreement. A lot of people write their purchase agreements very quickly and they'll put it, for instance, in the name, Jimmy's name, Jimmy Shatara, or assignee, or future assignee, thinking that, hey, I can just assign this to my LLC later, but I didn't want to create one in advance. And the problem with that is that you're really creating a lot of liability at the beginning of a transaction. And in that part of the case, you are, as a buyer, you have the least amount of information that you ever have about the property, and you have no control over it, and you have no control over the seller. So the importance of having a new LLC on the purchase agreement is that you may decide you don't want to buy this property, that there's problems with it, there's issues, and you want to get out of the deal, you want to walk away. And what you can have is litigation that comes from walking away from the deal, and the seller thinks that you're breaking the purchase agreement, you think they are breaking it, and then you've got litigation that's going forward. And you do not want to have that in your personal name. So if Jimmy had bought a property in his name in that purchase agreement and hadn't quite got to the level of having an LLC yet, now he's embroiled in that litigation personally. And that is the opposite of what you want. So now everything that Jimmy owns, all the shares of all his other companies, those are all being drug into this litigation as an exposure and violating the idea of asset protection. So you really, we think this is the best practice, and we do it for our clients. And the more sophisticated they are, the more they do it. And they're sophisticated because they've got the experience of having things go bad, and they don't want it to go bad again. So they're like, okay, we're going to do it right this time. I got my fingers caught in the door on this other deal. So they learn by experience. They learn by, the school of hard knocks. And it's really, really, really important to have everything in its own entity so that you sequester that liability into every single transaction, every single property, and property number one does not poison property number 2 or 3 or 4 down the road, whether it's at the purchase level or in future litigation or something like that. So that's a very key point. Thank you for that question. It's a great one. I want to give you just a couple more stats. In statewide, there was another 12,000 or 11,900 tort claims. Those are like personal injuries. So those could be cases at premises liability at a apartment or a house that you're renting. Could be in a commercial setting if you're also a commercial investor. Premises liability is very big. So 12,000 cases last year. Collection cases, these are cases about money disputes, 106,400 cases last year, disputes over money. And this would capture all of the cases that are disputes with your contractors or any other type of creditor. Now, the one exception to that would be mortgage foreclosures. There was 13,000 mortgage foreclosures in 2019. So a lot of investors, if I can talk about this for a minute, they think, well, I'm an investor. Those mortgage foreclosures are for the people who are being unsuccessful, or they are cases where, the investor and the owner of the property is not sophisticated and they're going under. Let me tell you, some of the biggest, just look in the newspaper, the biggest companies in the world file bankruptcy. And those are bankruptcies because of creditor claims, because they went under, and they could be publicly traded companies, or they could be multi-million-dollar investors that have big lines of credit on their properties and big mortgages. And if something goes wrong in the business plan or some other unforeseen circumstance happens, those mortgages become the first thing that goes into litigation. And that might be from even a little mechanics lien or some other default under your loan documents. And there are many, we've represented many litigation cases in debtor creditor situations where, you know, our client was not poor or broke or anything else. They just were in a bad spot in a business transaction, and these mortgage foreclosures come up. And if you're not set up correctly, what you're going to find is that you're very exposed. And that's not the time that you want to figure that out. We want to help you get set up correctly up front so that you don't have to worry about any of these situations. And in the materials, we give a kind of a lengthy example of a piece of litigation we've been doing for almost 2 years. And we represent the creditor in this case. And I'm not naming names or whatever, but we represent a creditor. It's not a CYREA member. And the debtor is a multimillionaire. And the property is a multi-million-dollar commercial property. And this debtor is very sophisticated, and he uses many of the type of strategies that we teach in this course. And because of that, he was able to maintain control of the property, maintain control of the process of refinancing, maintain control of all these different things, and have his personal assets, which are substantial, protected over here on the side. I've got other clients that we're going to talk about, or other situations I'm aware of that are the exact opposite, where the clients did not follow this basic type of structure that we use, and they didn't manage themselves correctly, and they had catastrophic losses that they never would have anticipated. Again, these are people I'm referring to in these examples and that we talk about in the course are multimillionaires that have, you know, substantial sophistication. So it can happen to anybody, is my point in this litigation and all these cases. Don't think it's just the other guys that are making a mistake and they're dumb and you're smarter than them. You're not. Everybody can get into a business situation or a problem that creates litigation, and there's tons of it. And these are just the stats for 1 year, right? Imagine capturing this for, you know, every year that you own a piece of property. So the litigation is a big reason why we as a law firm, you know, do so much asset protection, and we preach it constantly to our clients and to our CYREA members. This is why we developed the course. And the second, I'm still on my main point. Why did we do this course? Because of litigation. Why else did we do it? Because we've got so many repetitive type of questions. And when I meet with a client for the first time and we talk about, you know, forming an LLC for them, they might have heard that, they've done some reading, they've been on some blogs, they've been on the internet, and they've got a list of questions. And they come in, we sit down at the conference table, and I can tell you what their questions are in advance because they all ask a lot of the same type of questions because they're learning, and they are the main issues in forming companies for asset protection. And what we did was take all those questions that I always get, and then we added, you know, combined them all, because some clients will have one question and others will have this other. And we just kind of combined them all and then added on top of it, you know, like a broader understanding of what the law is around LLCs, why you need them, why you use them, what's the statute say, etc. And really just go through it and dive into it. And I teach the course on video. So there's hours and hours and hours of video of all these different topics. And Jimmy might be able to show you on the screen later the outline of the course and the chapters and the documents and that kind of a thing. And I just, you know, I said, what do people always wanted to know about? And so we then put it on video, and then we created a set of forms as well and said, if you want to create your own LLCs and put this into practice on your own, you can do it. And I walk you through it step by step by step by step of how to do it. And I've got it highlighted, right? So if there's something to fill in on one of the templates, it's highlighted in yellow. And I, you know, wave the cursor over and say, this is what you need to put in here. This is why. We've already discussed it. And you can really listen to all the different discussions as we go along. Jimmy, I thought I saw a question pop up. Did I?
Yeah, we got a couple questions. Some of them, it looks like you're going to answer already in the outline. So I don't know if we might want to hold off a little bit because I think you're going to talk about a lot of this, but just to recap, we have two from Bob. Any tips on working with the lender? that says no to deeding the property into the LLC even after offering a personal guarantee. And then his second question is, will you cover the Series LLC for multiple properties? And then we got one more after him.
I'll do that. I'll do it for both, handle both of those things. So how do you deal with a lender that's not cooperating? You should, I hate to say this, maybe consider some additional lenders, some additional resources, because there are plenty of them out there that will write a loan to the name of the LLC and have you as a personal guarantor. That's standard common business practice in the lending community if you're working with the right lenders. And not every lender is set up to handle the kind of borrowing that you're trying to do. There's different, they call them facilities. And a bank has all these different lending facilities, and they all have their own rules and regulations within the bank. You can't just say, I've got a great credit score and here's a great property, why won't they make me a loan? It's because every bank has its own requirements, and every bank has its own loan programs, and they also have their own lending histories that they're trying to fit you into those programs. So I would encourage you to look for additional outside lenders. There's lots of them out there, and look for somebody that will accommodate the LLC structure, because it's the right structure, and they ought to want that, right? They ought to want you to protect their asset, their collateral, and have it segregated from other properties, right? If it was all in your name, then all of their collateral could be taken down by some event that happens with a different property. So it's to the bank's advantage to segregate the collateral and their lending exposure to that one property, and then you've got your personal guarantee on top of it that gives you the best result. So would be my approach on that. On the Series LLC, I will talk about that, and that's a type of specialized LLC. We haven't done any of them because when I got into it, they just seemed like more of a hassle than they were really worth. And we really try to solve some of those issues by creating this course and allowing people to very economically create as many LLCs as they want on their own. And some of my clients do that, and they have us do one, and then they kind of learn the system, they're comfortable with it, and they do multiples on their own going forward. But the Series LLC is this idea that you can have multiple entities under one that's called a master, and then these other LLCs are under it. I think that is a little bit more appropriate in a syndication kind of environment. If you're doing a bunch of projects and you have different types of partners, but one main structure. So in that series, you might have this group of investors coming in with you, and this next one, you got a different group of investors and going in with you, but you still have to create the entity. There's not a lot of savings with it, right? So you still have to create the entity. You still got to have bank accounts. You still got to have management. You still have to do everything that you're supposed to do with an LLC. So I don't see the big advantage for most real estate investors, and I don't run across it in my practice. In 27 years, I do not see that as a go-to entity ever, right? I just never run against it where we've seen it. Much more common to have this multiple layer structure that we're talking about, with either a holding company above it, a separate LLC for each entity, or just the individual entities for every property as the best asset protection and the best management. So I hope that helps you with the series. It's a great statute, but I don't think it adds a lot to the basic structure of having just individual LLCs going along.
Okay, we have one more from Stephanie. What are your thoughts on creating the LLC in Nevada to protect your assets?
Yeah, Stephanie, great question. Thank you for that. And there's a lot of literature out there about preferred venue, is what that's called, preferred venue. Venue is the court that you're operating in. And some states, like Nevada and others, have tried to create statutes that say, if you form your LLC here, you get all these super duper califragilistic protections. And what they don't tell you in those materials, those advertising materials, is that when you come to do business in Indiana or any other state, the governing law is going to be Indiana. So it doesn't matter whether you're in Alaska, South Dakota, New Jersey, New York, Florida, whatever, doesn't matter where you form it. When you buy real estate in Indiana, you're going to have to register that company to do business in Indiana. And when you do that, you are subjecting yourself to the jurisdiction and venue of the courts in the state of Indiana, and the law in Indiana is going to govern that. And particularly with real estate transactions, real estate is almost always governed by the location, the county where the real estate is located. So I'm cognizant that that my colleagues around the country are working on trying to, sell this idea that the law is going to be better for you in Nevada. I'm not so sure, because when you really pile down to it, you're going to be operating your business in Indiana, and you're not going to really be able to divest yourself of jurisdiction and venue in the Indiana courts. There is a little bit of an exception to that, and that some contracts are written that you would have to go to a home state. For instance, certain lenders would say, if you get a loan in Indiana, we're a company from an Ohio bank, and so we're going to litigate that in Ohio. But normally there's even statutes that overturn that and say, no, wait a minute, it's real estate. You got to do it in Indiana, even if the contract says otherwise. So there's a little bit of give and take on that, but I don't think you're really gaining a lot in other states. I think you're going to have to be subjected to the jurisdiction and venue where the property is located and where you're doing business. That's called long arm jurisdiction. You're brought into the state of Indiana from out of the state with your Nevada company because you're doing business here and your property is located here. So you're going to be stuck. Stuck, not in a bad way, but stuck.
And there was one question about lenders that don't give high rates on rental purchases. I know it seems like a little out of the scope of our conversation, but it was mentioned.
Yeah, that lenders are giving high rates. I'm not sure I understand the question. Could they resubmit that in a different way? I mean, investment property is going to often have a higher interest rate than your personal residence. All different kinds of loans, back to the idea of lending facilities and different types of loan packages from various lenders are all going to have different rates. I'm not sure if that's what they're referring to. That's lender specific. That's depends on your credit, depends on the property, et cetera. But investment properties are often going to have a higher rate, and you ought to be shopping. We've got some great lenders in Cyria that do a very good job for investors and provide some great products. So that'd be the first stop. Is that all I've got on the chat box right now?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, so we got through in the first half hour, we got through why did we create the course, right? The litigation and the questions we always get. I do want to jump into what is in the course and why we did, and what you're going to expect to get. So let me start out with that. And Jimmy, if you might be prepared to put on the screen the outline, the course outline a little bit in a second. But what we basically did was we took all these questions that we normally get and the topics that we normally get, and a lot of them are questions that you all are asking today. And we created a series of videos and went through them like I'm speaking to you directly right now. I just speak extemporaneously. I have an outline, but I tell you what I'm thinking about all these different subjects and what really happens in the real world, not theoretical. It's not academic at all. It's just the real world of what actually happens and what we do. And then in the videos, we also have a slide deck, a PowerPoint slide deck that is going through the points. So if you're a visual and an auditory learner, you're going to hear it. And then you're also going to see it in a presentation with a PowerPoint, and it's just written out all the key points and how we go through that. And that helps you find different things as you go through it. And you can go back and forth through all the videos and hear them over and over and over. The course is sold in an online format so that you can view it as many times as you want. There's no limit. You can start it and stop it anytime you want. So there's just lots of different flexibility. Jimmy, let me go ahead. If you can pull that up, I'll talk through that just a little bit.
Or it should.
Yeah, you got it. So what you're seeing there, what everybody should be seeing on their screen right now is we've got the course name is the LLC Blueprint, and we've got a description about what you're going to do, how to set up and maintain and scale up your business for real estate. And then we go through, as he's scrolling down, stop there if you would, all the different lessons of, and here's, you know, basically different chapters of what we go through. And every one of these chapters covers the video, and then there's the slide deck that I was talking about. And then if you'll go down below, I'm going to go over that for just a second. The formation and management walkthroughs. This is also a series of videos where I walk you through all the templates that we provide. So we provide a complete set of templates of everything you would need in the normal course of setting up your business, getting your tax ID number, registering with the Secretary of State, forming your operating agreement, membership certificates, your company minutes to get started, all the subscription agreement, all the different documents you would normally have. And we even put in there some different templates for minutes that you would use that are common. For instance, if you're going to buy a property, the bank is going to want to see, and the title company is going to want to see company resolutions that say the company's authorized to buy this, who's authorized to sign for the company, etc. That kind of thing is included. Same thing for lending. So we include all these different documents in the program, as well as how to fill them out, and just go through it step by step by step, literally one after the other. So I want to get through, go through that. Back up at the beginning, the course introduction, Jimmy's got his cursor on. That's a lot of the things we're talking about today, right? What's covered, what's not, right? So in the second chapter, you know, we don't cover a bunch of hype, right? It's very straight to the point of business, of what you need to know, not, you know, a bunch of fluff. We talk about also what is an LLC after that, a limited liability company. And I do want to spend a minute on this, because an LLC is different from a corporation, and it's different from a sole proprietor, different from a partnership. All of these different legal entities have different liability protections or risks. And I go through all of that, of why you have all this risk as a personal, as a, you know, sole proprietor, what a S Corp would do for you, why people don't usually use S Corps for real estate, because for investment properties, and there's a lot of tax problems with it when you're going forward and doing a 1031 exchange, you know, how the LLC came about. It's a creature of the statutes, etc. So we do that. Skipping down a couple there, why the LLC and liability protection and the corporate veil, these kind of all go together, these chapters, and they're real important about describing how you are protected personally from your company, and how those are two totally separate legal entities. And the idea of piercing the corporate veil is the idea that if you have a company and you don't operate it correctly, and then you're sued, then your party that's suing you is going to be able to find you personally and attach all your personal assets. And so we teach you what is really happening all over the country. I review the cases and I hit you the high points so that you can see what did the courts in Nevada, you know, there is a Nevada case in there, or other states in Indiana, what really happened where the corporate veil was pierced or not pierced, and how the court analyzed those facts. And a lot of it is extremely intensive on a fact basis. And what I want you to take away from today's talk is just that if you just do the basics, you'll be okay, right? Have your entity, have your minutes, operate it correctly, create bank accounts, account for things separately, and you're going to be fine. And but when you see the cases, you'll get some comfort of what's really happening out there to know, well, I wonder what courts really do, and are they really going to do this or that? So we cover that very, very in depth. A charging order down here about 2/3 of the way down, that's a whole nother chapter. This is how a creditor collects against you through an LLC. And there's a lot of good information there. Also, the next chapter is dispelling myths of the LLC. And this is where I go through some of the things that were maybe asked about, like the Nevada company, and is that any better or not? I take all the typical objections that we get of why you should do this or that, and I blow up the myths, and I show what is wrong with the different thinking about them, and why if you hear something, it maybe isn't resonating correctly for you, and you're not getting the full story. So I try to give you the full story of why the LLC works and what doesn't work. The next chapter is on self-directed IRA investing and how do you use an LLC for that, which we always recommend. We see a lot of this, clients using self-directed IRAs, and they put the property in the name of their IRA. And I just can't even believe that the custodians are not requiring LLCs, because when you do that, you've exposed your entire IRA to liability. So your entire life savings, all that you've saved up and put over here for retirement, is now exposed unless you use an LLC. So we walk you through how to do that with this structure. And I can only just encourage you, if you've got an IRA, self-directed IRA through any company, and your property is not in an LLC, just say you have exposed all of your retirement funds to a creditor or a lawsuit. Very dangerous. So please don't do that. Please, please, please. That's really, I think, a good summary of what's in the course and what we've been covering. I want to open it up again for some questions, and then Jimmy, also maybe if you would kind of walk through how to get through an order and that kind of a thing like that.
Absolutely. So we have one question from Ali. How much is the consulting fees to get an asset protection plan prepared? Is it a lump sum cost or per hourly, and how much?
So Ali, it's a great question. We normally work on an hourly basis, and I'm going to have Jimmy address the pricing for the course, because what we've done with the course is try to price it at a fraction of what it would be to, have an in-person consulting with me at my hourly rate of $350. We have other associates in the office of $225 and whatnot. So a lot of it can depend. So if you want us to do the work, it's going to be more expensive. If you use the course and want to, it'll be more efficient and economical for you, but not everybody maybe is going to want to do that. So some people who are listening may want to buy the course just for the education. And they're going to say, wait, I don't want to try to form all these on my own. That's too much risk in my mind. I want the law firm to do it for me, but now I'm a better consumer. I've got a full understanding of what to do and how to do it, and I'll be able to do some of these things on my own. And so we can come alongside you. The other idea would be full service legal work, where we're just on an hourly basis doing things for people. Jimmy?
Okay. Great. So before we move on to the next couple of questions, what this is on the actual sales page for the LLC Blueprint, there's a lot of frequently asked questions. So again, if we weren't able to answer one of your questions, a lot of this is going to be answered here on the page. So please do go through this and see a lot of this information. Also, talking about the value, you will also see, and just know when you talk to an attorney what this would actually cost for an attorney to do it for you versus doing it on your own, so you can see the value proposition. We talk about that on the sales page as well. So you can kind of see some of the sales numbers there as well. And also, this is 20 video modules, all the templates and overviews Jeff has already mentioned. And we do have a money back guarantee. So if, within 14 days, if you go through 20% of the course and you do not want to move forward, you will get your money back. So we want to, again, we're trying to provide value. Jeff has already alluded to that and given you guys value about what this course can do for you. But we also have that as well. Again, learn anywhere on your mobile phone. So this is a mobile on your desktop. And now going to a couple other questions, both from Danielle. What are your thoughts on listing an attorney as a registered agent for each LLC? And then, is a DBA necessary for an LLC?
Thank you for those two questions. We cover that in the materials and all the different options so that people understand a registered agent is the person who receives notices, official legal notices about anything on behalf of the company. When we form an LLC for a client, we always serve as the registered agent because we want to receive, and that's included in our cost when we set the company up for the first 2 years. And we want to receive legal documents because we know the difference between spam and phishing, things that you might get that are not important versus things that are critical. And so we like to get that for clients, and we'd be happy to do that for anybody here as well. There are outside services that also commercial services, and those are referenced in the materials that you can hire as a registered agent to receive things for you. And, it's totally up to you, or you can be your own registered agent, right? So that's another option. So several different things. We go through those in the course, the pros and cons, how to do each one. But we normally serve as the registered agent for clients when we set up an LLC. What was the second question on that?
Is a DBA necessary for an LLC?
It is not necessary unless you want it to be, right? So, for instance, the law firm legal name is like our URL, jeffjinkslaw.com LLC. That's the legal name of the company. That's what's registered with the Secretary of State. That's what's on our tax return and on our EIN number. But we filed a DBA, Jeff Jinks Law, right? So if you want to do business as a different name, it is essential that you register that DBA with the Secretary of State in every state that you're doing business. So you don't have to, but you can. So if there's not any other questions, Vicki, we're about into an hour for our presentation. Is there anything that you would like us to cover separately, or any other final questions from the group?
No, actually, this was excellent. It helped us to explain to everyone why we did it and how to take advantage of it. And the cost to go through this program is a whole lot less than the hourly. So it makes a lot of sense to me. So Jeff, thank you very much. Jimmy, thank you very much. Everyone on the call, thank you. Unless we have any more questions, we are going to go ahead and adjourn, and everyone have a wonderful Christmas.